In.
I'm sure I'm the only employee, the only AKSI in Hainan Airlines. I'm sure of that. We only have 80 U.S. employees.
Oh wow, only 80 folks. So I'm going to try to get in here and say, hey folks, this is Justin Gazaba, and this is the Business, Life, and Brotherhood podcast. And with me today is Mr. Joel Chusid. And so I'm going to introduce Joel, and if you wouldn't mind, we'll just go right into it. And how about 45 seconds of, I know, right? Of a little bit about where you went to school, chapter, and then your position today, synopsis best you can.
Oh my God, 45 seconds.
Let's see. No.
Well, I spent 4 years at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville.
Okay.
And in my sophomore year, I joined AKSI's Zeta Lambda chapter. And I was an officer there. I was Master Rituals. We had our own house in my senior year, so I lived in the house.
Nice.
That was a great opportunity. I stay in touch with some of my brothers that are around the country. Oh, make a long story short, after that I spent 25 years at American Airlines, and I retired as Vice President of Sales and Marketing for the American Eagle Division, which I started in 1984. And after that I spent some time in Latin America, came back, spent a couple of years at China Eastern Airlines in Los Angeles, which got me into the China side. And I've been at Hainan Airlines here as Executive Director in the U.S. for about 10 years. My 10th year now.
So that's awesome. That's a perfect synopsis. That was great. That was so
rushed.
You did so much in such a short amount of time. What I'd like to follow up on is coming out of school and getting that first position over at American. Was that something that you knew you wanted to do first off, or was that something that you kind of fell into? How did you get into the industry?
Okay, airlines were always in my blood.
Okay.
And while I was at UT, I was the only campus sales rep. I actually worked for American Airlines in Knoxville at UT in promoting the service out of Knoxville. When I graduated, there were no jobs. It was somewhat of a recession, couldn't get a job at...
What year was that?
1971.
Okay, so that was right before the oil crisis and,
yeah,
and
it was
all
before
that.
Yep. But I ended up doing some, went into business with a college friend, spent several years working with him in a kind of a wholesale appliance business.
Oh, wow.
And then I said, and I did a lot of traveling. I did a lot of traveling. I traveled to Europe every summer on my own dime when I was still in high school. And so I did quite a bit of traveling, and I wanted to see the world. That was one of my goals, which I've certainly managed to do that.
Yeah.
But in fact, when I was in college, one spring break, I went to Fiji for spring break.
Oh wow! Okay.
Because American Airlines flew to Fiji at the time. Anyway, so I've had 4 years in the appliance business. I said, this is not what I want to do. So American Airlines was hiring because they were opening a new reservations office up in Hartford, Connecticut, and I was living in the New York area at the time. So I went to work part-time for American in New York for a few months. They transferred us up to Hartford. I spent 3 years in Hartford, applied for a job at headquarters, which was in Dallas. I was moving to Dallas, and I went down and I was an analyst in regulatory proceedings, which was just about the time the CAB was ending, which was the regulatory government agency that ran aviation and transport, things of that nature.
Okay.
And then we went to deregulation.
Yep.
Opened up a lot of things in the airline business, and so I stayed with American. I did that for 1 or 2 years, and I became I was manager of airline sales planning, which means we were selling Sabre, which was our reservation system, which is now an independent company, to small airlines, to regional carriers.
Okay.
And then that sort of metamorphed into code sharing with American Eagle. We ended up buying them. And so in 1984, we started the American Eagle program. In 1986, we started buying the individual carriers, and the rest is kind of history. And I spent the rest of my career at American Eagle, growing American Eagle. Mm-hmm. It was hundreds of airplanes. It was nationwide, international, in fact, down to Mexico and Caribbean, Canada. And then I retired there in 2001 and figured I was just going to have a life of leisure. But actually, American kind of called me back and asked if I would do a project at China Eastern, who was their partner at the time, China Eastern Airlines.
Okay.
So I had a couple trips to Shanghai, and I ended up working for China Eastern for 2 years in Pasadena, California. And after 2 years of that, Hainan Airlines came and kind of got me. Hainan is a private airline,
Yep.
and it was interesting, and I was commuting from Dallas.
So they kind of recruited.
They came to me and we had some discussions.
Yeah,
I went on
okay.
for things with China, never done quick. So this
Right.
took a couple of years back and forth. I did some other contract jobs in the meantime with some other airlines too, with Cayman Airways in the Caribbean, and I did some work in the Caribbean Hotel Association.
Wow.
Then Hainan was looking to fly to the United States. The airline started in '93. So they were a pretty young airline. They had no flights to the U.S. They were just getting wide-body aircraft and doing international flying.
Okay.
And I sat down with them and we discussed where the airline should fly in the U.S. first. And I'm cutting to the chase, but we decided that Seattle was the best place to fly.
Right.
And make a long story short, I said, I'll consult with Hainan for a year. And they said, no, we want you to be an employee. And I said, well, I'm not sure if I want to move to Seattle and all this other discussion. But to make a long story short again, here I am 10 years later.
Yeah.
And we've grown from, we started in June 2008, June 9th, 2008. And I remember standing right across the street at the airport on the jet bridge with Governor Gregoire when the first plane came in.
Oh yeah.
And we had 3 to 4 flights a week. We've now grown to 11 flights a week in Seattle, about 45 flights a week in the United States and Canada. So from there we opened Toronto, then we opened Boston, Chicago, Calgary, Las Vegas, San Jose, and LA, and we're just getting ready to open New York.
Okay.
So the company's grown
Wow.
from, it's now number 170 on the Fortune 500 list, part of the H&A group. H&A is number 170.
Okay. Awesome. That's incredible. So with traveling and having that being such a big part of your early life, high school, always traveling, in college, was that something because of your travel that you sought out American to be that campus rep? Is that kind of how?
Oh yeah, I mean, I had
because you were
heard,
looking like for a spiff,
and
or
you know, I got paid next to nothing.
Yeah.
They paid me a salary of $45 a month.
Oh, okay.
No, excuse me, $75 a month. It was.
Okay.
And but I had a couple passes, so
Yeah.
I managed to stretch those passes into a trip to
That makes sense.
Fiji with Hawaii, and another one and I used one for Transcon, and I got to learn the airline business.
Yeah.
What's interesting though is I always wanted to do international. American was not flying to Europe, was not flying to Asia, was not flying to Latin America. In the course of the time I spent in America, I got to go to all those places eventually. I went to
Okay.
Europe. Europe was the first place I went actually. Before I even saw most of the United States, I was in Europe before I was in California.
Wow.
And because I grew up in New Jersey, I kind of neglected to say that previous part. But and I live in New York. But Texas is where I spend most of my time. And now
Yeah.
I spend my time between Texas and here, but I'm in Seattle most of the time because that's where work is.
Yeah.
But the international side always intrigued me, particularly when growing up. I was very interested in the places that were more obscure.
Sure.
For example, I'd look at maps and I'd say, boy, I'd like to go to Albania someday, or I'd like to go to China or to Russia. So I managed to go to all those places. Albania is like my second home. I've been there so many times,
Yeah?
6 or 7 times, and I have good friends in Albania. It's totally different now. But those places intrigued me. And I spent a lot of time in Latin America.
Mm-hmm.
I like Latin America so much I bought a home in Buenos Aires, Argentina.
Yeah, that's
So I
awesome.
get down there when I can. And I also get involved in the culture of the country, the history of the country, the language as best I can. I don't know any Albanian, but I can a few words, but I can deal more in Spanish and Portuguese and things of that nature. But China I knew nothing about. When I
Okay.
first got a call from Americans saying, would you be interested in working with Chinese? I said, that's like going to the moon.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about China. I took a little bit of language courses, just a few words and things, but I learned the biggest difference in working for a Chinese airline
Mm-hmm.
is the culture is so different. And I
Okay.
mean, not just the language, but the culture, the business culture, the expectations. I didn't know how, it was very challenging at first, and I always tell people, it's the most frustrating job but it's also the most rewarding and enriching. And look back all these years, at the time when you couldn't travel to China, you couldn't bring anything in from China, and now go back and forth to China, like I go back and forth to China more than I go back and forth to Texas, it seems sometimes.
Yeah.
So I feel very much at home in Beijing, as I feel in Tirana, Albania, or Buenos Aires, or in Europe someplace.
That's awesome. Did you find that when, and this is just something that I've heard with China, that I think you mentioned it beforehand, but everything takes a very long time to get done, but that's also because those business relationships are expected to last
Correct.
for a very long
So
time.
there's an
as well.
expression, lots of expressions.
Yeah.
But in China, anything is possible, but everything is difficult.
Okay.
And it's true. Things take a long time. The expectation of time is totally different. Particularly, you've got a time difference between 15 hours between here and China. So all night long, I'm getting emails.
Yes.
And they want an answer immediately. So I wake up in the morning, got a pile of emails. When I get home in the evening after work, I get a pile of emails starting to build.
Yeah.
And they want answers right away. But if I need to get something done, it may have to go through a level of 30 people to approve something.
Oh wow.
Some things are not. It's not like everything takes that long, but some things do take a long time.
Sure.
The relationship part is very important. Now, in Latin America, it's similar. Latin America, when you go into a meeting, it's almost kind of rude to just sit down and immediately start meeting. You have to, meet somebody, get a hug, a handshake, how's the family, and do small talk. They sit down, and you develop relationships. Relationships are very important. So years later, you can call upon somebody. Oh yes, we met such and such. Oh yes, blah 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 blah. And so it's very much, the Latin culture is very much like that. China is similar, and they have something called guanxi.
Okay.
Guanxi is where you build a relationship, but it's a relationship of trust, and it gets to some extremes where it's also a relationship of doing somebody a favor, and you do somebody a great favor, and then they're expected to reciprocate.
Sure.
Now, it doesn't necessarily mean it's something illegal or anything like that, but did you a favor once, you're sort of in debt at the time. This is very common in Chinese business. Guanxi is also can be called, to a point, nepotism in the U.S.
Sure.
So we have a lot of family members and things like that. This is such and such's son or such and such's sister or whatever. So some of that goes on. Again, and there's a lot of things that we're not used to in the U.S. Now, a couple of times you're asked to do things, for example, that may be illegal in China, but you mean have been rolling in there with no film.
Oh no, we got film. It's on. Yeah. So we're talking about the difference between operational meetings, Germany, Switzerland, versus relationship meetings
in China and Latin America. So when you're at AKSI, there's meetings.
Yep.
And you learn Robert's Rules of Order and all kinds of things like that. Every company has different procedures for business. Chinese business meetings are where people sit is very important. What seat, who's the person that's, the guest of honor. Same thing with banquets. Banquets are a big deal in China too. And a lot of work is done not just in formal business meetings, but also outside. So, for example, in the United States, a lot of work is done on the golf course.
Yes.
Or it's done at a cocktail party.
Yep.
I went to an AKSI session, a training session, it was pretty full, on how to deal with the cocktail culture in the United States.
Oh, interesting.
Because someone said, we'll meet for drinks. We might meet for coffee, but we'll meet for drinks.
Yeah.
However, in China, they don't do cocktails. They do them, but it's not a place where business is done. They're not familiar with going to a cocktail party. Hi, my name is such and such, blah, blah, blah. They don't do that. They're very uncomfortable walking up to someone they don't know.
Oh,
and so you have a banquet, and there generally it's a round table. Who's the guest of honor sitting next to the host, to the left of the host, the right of the host, I believe it is, depending on which way you're looking. And everybody's seated around the table. There's a lazy Susan. Everybody shares. The host will help serve you if you're the guest of honor or the host, whatever. There's a whole culture with that.
Yeah.
And then there's the toasting culture. So they'll do the toasts, continuous toasts, which could be little glasses of Mao Tai or baijiu, little,
Yeah.
high alcohol stuff, and you have to learn how to deal with that. Japan is the same with sake,
Right.
but you have to learn how to deal with that. Not to mix the drinks, and when to call it. Not when you've got to empty your glass and turn it upside down on your head. The culture's all different, and that's one of the international things that's I kind of enjoy. I'm still learning.
Sure.
Still learning, how to, you got to eat with chopsticks, things of that nature.
Yeah.
But in Europe, it's much more stiff.
Right.
There may be a meal involved, but business is done more in meetings there.
Yeah.
Latin America, again, a lot of stuff, you might be invited to somebody's home for a barbecue, things of that nature.
Oh yeah.
And once you start, you deal with people face to face, you've got a different relationship. In the case of China, I deal with a lot of people by email, or social media, which is we use WeChat.
WeChat. Yep. 100%.
Everybody uses WeChat, and so a lot of people I just know from WeChat or from email,
Yeah.
maybe a phone call, but rarely, because there's no secretaries in China, generally speaking, and so everybody has to be reached on their cell phone.
Yeah.
That is a big difference in terms of the culture, how business is done.
Yeah.
But once you meet somebody face to face, spend time with them, you've got a relationship established. It doesn't mean you've got guanxi, because you haven't done a favor for anybody, and it's not necessarily expected that you will, but they become a friend.
Yeah.
And so I found that to be very similar to the Latin culture, as opposed to European culture.
Right.
But China's changing, and so you've got a lot of Europeans doing business
Yeah.
in China.
Westernization.
It's westernized, so there's kind of
Yeah.
a combination. I try and teach my colleagues how to deal with the cocktail party culture. And
Right.
if one of the first things you learn, you don't get drunk.
Yeah.
When to stop, what to drink. If you don't drink, how to deal with it, how to handle, if somebody offers you a drink, what to do. And that was the AKSI training we had
Yeah, that sounds
in the
super
chapter. And this is very useful because it varies so much, from country to country, and certainly region to region.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
So meetings are very important, but you don't always do business in a meeting room. You do it on the golf course.
Right.
And even if you don't play golf, there's ways to get around it. Or, at a sporting event or a cocktail party.
Who hosted that event that you went to with AKSI? Do you remember the host?
Alan Tsai, I believe, arranged it. I think
Okay.
he maybe has graduated this last year, I believe.
Was that a local?
That was done here. Yeah, actually they had somebody come from a winery,
Okay.
and they had a whole class, with, we didn't do tasting or anything like that, but they had a whole class on how to deal with the cocktail culture for a job interview, as an example.
Okay.
What happens if you're invited to a job interview and somebody says, how would you like a drink? Do you accept it? Do you not accept it? What do you do?
Yeah.
And they also had another training class I went to, which was how to deal with business meal.
Okay.
I remember, for example, you don't ever get cherry tomatoes because they're dangerous. They roll off the plate,
Yeah,
they
they
squirt,
squirt.
all kinds
They
of things.
kind of.
But there was a whole class given on how to deal with a business meal. When, do you clean your plate,
Yeah.
what to order, what not to order, that kind of a thing.
Was that was that road?
That was
then?
road chapter 2.
Yeah. Okay.
So we didn't have, when I was back in Tennessee, we didn't have this.
Yeah.
I mean, now it's becoming much more, well, the way business is done has changed,
Right.
and there's a need for this.
Yeah.
Back in the old days, it was the old-fashioned interview where you answered the ad of the newspaper.
Yeah.
Went for an interview, things you had a resume, there was no internet, no cell phones, hard to believe, but times are different. Nowadays,
I remember this.
yeah,
that
and I
was-
do interviews sometimes by Skype.
Yeah.
Sometimes I interview people and I never actually have met them in person.
Right, right. I wanted to come back to the coming out of college and your wholesale business, because that's a pretty entrepreneurial endeavor. Was that something that was at just somebody that you had in a friend from college or a brother, or how
Wasn't a
how did
brother.
that decide? How did you decide that was worth doing?
Well, okay, it was one of my best friends in college.
Okay.
He had a little bit of the business started,
Okay.
and was basically buying from companies in, obviously it wasn't China at the time, it was mainly Europe. And I learned a few things from those 4 years I did that. It's very difficult to go into business with friends.
Yeah.
After 4 years we were kind of at each other's throats. We weren't enemies or anything like that, but it can be challenging. When you have a relationship with somebody as a friend for several years, all of a sudden you decide to go into business with them. That's a challenge.
Yeah.
But we dealt with large customers. We dealt with Macy's and a lot of the department stores and things like that. And then we actually manufactured some items ourselves. We had some things. There was a dental item that we sold to a store called Bloomingdale's. We had a hair dryer, things like that. And this one, it was okay. I enjoyed it. We had some trips to Italy because the factory was in Italy.
Yep.
But I still had this, like malaria. I had travel in the blood.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just travel, but I still enjoyed the airline business. I almost got a job at Japan Airlines, believe it or not, way back when. But the American thing came through, and I said, Japan Airlines would be more interesting because it's international.
Yeah.
But the other one actually turned out to be the right decision because it opened the doors to so much more, so many more opportunities.
Right.
Whereas working for a smaller company, the opportunity is not as great. It's smaller in the United States. Now this is different in Hainan because this is like starting a new airline, which I'd already done in my life.
Yeah.
With the American Eagle, and so this was an opportunity of like starting a new airline, even though the airline was already established in China.
Right.
But it was
no presence here.
No, and then we had to build the presence and build the brand identity, and it's growing a lot faster than I expected it to grow.
That's kind of fun.
Oh yeah,
That's
it
great.
is.
When when those transitions happen from happening like being a rep on campus to that business that you started with a friend, obviously you had a relationship with that person first. Mm-hmm. Did you know anybody in the space at American Airlines, or was that a purely you went out and
No, I didn't
applied
know anybody.
and did the whole thing?
I didn't know anybody there.
Okay.
I met a few people when I was doing that, but I was pretty much on my own. I reported to the city manager, but I didn't see him very often. I literally had to I was even not given any training.
Oh wow.
So I'd have to go into the reason it was funny, I went to the Fiji house. There was a fraternity called Fiji, and I said, I just came back from Fiji, and this would be a great opportunity for you guys to go to Fiji and things like that.
Smart. I like it.
But at the time there were youth fairs, 12 to 21 youth fairs, and I promoted that. There were no frequent flyer programs.
Right.
Airfares were regulated. Again, this was pre-deregulation. So I just did what I thought I had to do, and you kind of learn. I have kind of an outgoing personality, so I was able to go out and promote and set things up on campus, and just from doing it a bit. But I was never sent any training. I did it for 2 years. It didn't get my foot in the door at American, which was in New York at the time, and I said, well, I guess I'll have to just give it up for now. And my friend said, oh, come to business with me, and we'll have a good time. And I did have a good time doing it. I learned a lot. But when I went back to American, it was just as a starter, just before deregulation came. And again, I could go many paths. Reservations was actually as sort of an entree into the rest of the company. It's sort of the basic.
Yeah.
It's changed a lot. Now a lot of the reservation offices are at home. You call somebody at an airline, they're answering at home.
Yeah.
Like many of the telemarketing, things like that.
Yep.
At the time, there were big offices. They consolidated them all into Hartford from several cities, New York and Boston and Buffalo and Washington. And they now it's the reverse, completely reverse. But I was there. We opened the office in Hartford. I was one of the folks that started that. I didn't start the office, but I was one of the first employees in the office. And again, I said, Hartford's a nice city, but Dallas is where the headquarters was moving, and so they had some opportunities in Dallas, and I applied for a couple of them, and the regulatory proceedings one was interesting because it dealt with new routes.
Yeah.
And in those olden days, again, you didn't have CRTs, no screens or laptops.
Yeah.
A lot of paperwork, so I had stacks of things on my desk, but I learned the system. And I worked on the first Latin American route that American had, which was Dallas to Rio.
Okay.
And I got to fly on the second flight to Rio on a Saturday, and I spent Sunday there and flew back, and I was at my desk on Monday morning.
Oh, wow.
I won't forget that.
That's awesome. That's really great. So, you've retired once. And they brought you and they brought you back in.
They kind of
right?
brought me back in to go work. Would I be interested in working at Chinese? And I said no. Well, you should think about it because of this and this and this and this and this. And so
it's obviously compelling and something that you said it's in your blood and you've loved to do it.
And I showed up at China Eastern the first day, and I had gone to interviews in Shanghai. It took 9 months to negotiate this.
Yeah.
I show up in Pasadena the first day, and they weren't expecting me.
Oh, interesting.
So they said, "Oh, yes, you're the new guy. Oh, well, here's your office," and there was no furniture in it. I had to go buy my own furniture at IKEA, and come back and arrange to get it put together.
Yeah.
And literally, again, starting from scratch again, which goes back to the days when I was at American Airlines in college. Here it is. Do what you want. No training, no nothing.
Wow.
And I coming to Hainan, so I didn't feel like a fish out of water coming to Hainan because there was nobody to ask.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
Myself and another fellow from China at the time, and the two of us had to find this office. We had to find housing for the staff. We had to find crew accommodations.
So it was a real startup. I mean, so with kind of pioneering the whole way through, a lot of folks, when you visit student members and chapters, they think, hey, I'm going to get this degree, and then I'm going to do this thing, and it's going to be like a 1-for-1. Whereas, realistically, it's, hey, I'm going to get a degree in a background where I can learn to learn, and something that might be close to something I'll use, or maybe it's not. But there's going to be a lot of on-site, on-the-job, continuous training and learning. You've
got to be very pragmatic. One thing I'm impressed with the AK side folks that I met at Row Chapter, for example, a lot of them had double majors.
Mm-hmm.
They were majoring in business as well as in biology.
Okay.
Or I had somebody that was studying. And there were a lot of Chinese students also that were there. And so when we did the mock interviews, and I would say, why are you learning, why are you getting a degree in business and a degree in hydrology or something like that? Well, I want to manage dam projects, and I want to look at the business side of it.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't. I mean, years ago, you're building dams, whether they're in China or whatever,
right.
But you never had any business background, and you need to know that.
Yeah.
And so I'm impressed with the cadre of people that are out there now, double majors, which is not easy. I don't even know if I could have done it.
Yeah.
But because for that reason, but having the business background can get you in something totally different.
Right.
So you've got to, even though you've got a background, you never stop learning. I tell my staff here, and I've got Chinese staff and American staff, and we have a very diverse group in this office. We're always learning different words, part of the language thing. Mm-hmm. Even this morning, I was carpooling this morning with one of my Chinese colleagues, and I'll say something, and I'll say, "Do you know what that word was?" This morning the word was contiguous, and he said, "No, what is that?" And so I'm driving, and he's looking it up, and so he's got a new word today. But it's not, and it's not. That's not just a language difference. There may be a word in Chinese for it, but the use of the word.
Right.
And we do that pretty regularly here.
Yeah.
I think it's important.
It's super beneficial.
It's very beneficial, and it helps in terms of being able to survive internationally, because the language, what's the word I'm looking for? The vocabulary in different fields is different. In airlines, we have acronyms, a lot of acronyms and abbreviations, and even some of the words that are used here in airlines are used differently abroad.
Oh, interesting.
And so they don't, even from American Airlines to Hainan Airlines, we use different words for things at the airport. The words in Chinese are different, like for takeoff and things of that nature.
Wow. A few of the questions that I always like to ask are, with the path that you've taken and the work that you've done, if you were to go back in time to, say, yourself in high school or coming out of college, and you were able to give yourself 2 tangible, like realistic, actionable pieces of advice that would have helped you get where you wanted to go faster, is there something that you would or things that you know now that, gosh, if I had known that then, this would have smoothed out, or I would have been able to accomplish this faster, or something like that, something tangible that people can kind of hold on to and say, gosh, I I can do that and save myself some trouble.
That's kind of tough. I mean, I obviously had a choice of the kind of courses I took and things of that nature, and the paths I took. At the time, I took French as a language. I didn't learn Spanish until years later. I took some classes, a couple of years, I think about a year in Russian when I was in college. I can read, when I go to Russia, I can read the Cyrillic, you know, it helps in Serbia and places like that. But in terms of, I mean, I just kind of knew which direction I wanted to go in, and chose courses to do that, and also extracurricular activities. I got involved, for example, in the World Affairs Council. There was a Dallas Committee for Foreign Visitors that was where you would host people in town and show them around, and at the time, I made friends all over the world from that. So in terms of, I spoke at the University of Dallas's graduation a couple of years after I graduated, and I spoke about networking.
Okay.
Networking is probably one of the most critical things that you can do to get ahead in terms of once you're out of school. Now you've got LinkedIn, which works. At the time we didn't have LinkedIn.
Right.
We had Rolodexes, which are little cards and things of that nature. But you need it, and you don't want to meet everybody, but you want to meet people that, you know, I shouldn't say that. You really want to meet everybody, but you can be selective in terms of who you really need to keep in touch with.
Yeah.
That's
and
something
also,
that's very critical.
Going back to the relationships and the way that the Chinese build, and I'll butcher this, but guanxi.
Guanxi.
You know, if you can add value, if you can meet somebody and add value to them, and just say, hey, you know what, actually I was thinking about you, and you should connect with so-and-so, that's a form of networking where everybody wins and nobody, you know.
And if you're in, depending on the industry you're in, they turn out to be very small places. And I'll give you a good example. Yesterday, one of our employees in another city decided to take a job at American. Okay. And so he went to American. Turns out that the guy they interviewed him, that he's working for, I hired.
Oh, interesting.
And and I said to him, I said, did you know when you did your interview? It just so I didn't speak to the guy at all. I said that, you know, he's a very good guy. He says, oh yeah, he talked all about you and how much you did at American. I said, really? So there's a lot of small world things like that happen. Another thing is never burn bridges. Right. I can tell you stories about that, but you never want to leave a place with the door slamming. Yeah, so... You know, you never know if that person could... I'll give you another example. We had a situation where we had an employee that was working, and a new director came in, and this employee had come from another company where she had been fired. Oh, okay. The new director came in and was suddenly her boss. So this is a situation that you never know when that can happen, when you're going to have to work with that person again. I had one experience here where I had a little disagreement with one of the employees, and we were like, we didn't even talk to each other. Oh, wow. Now we're good friends. Yeah. Because the opportunity can come back where you can meet that person later, and in a different relationship, you learn that, you know, that was the past, it's water under the bridge, and now he's a VP of one of the divisions, and so, you know, we talk to each other and we have absolutely no problem. That's awesome. So you don't want to burn bridges, and you want to keep your networking opportunities open. Yeah. And these are practical things 100%. That are not really, that you don't really get taught these things in school. Yeah. But when you're at AKSAR, you also learn how to work with your fellow brothers. Yep. That's one of the reasons I asked the question, is because that theme presents itself often when you talk to people. Those types of things keep coming up, but I think it's one of those things that people don't realize how tangible it is, especially in chapter, when you're a student member, to really recognize what that can be and how to do those things, you know, so to present that to people and say, hey, these are some things you should focus on. And I love that, language learning, networking, and not burning bridges are all super tangible. I mean, and you can relate those to the chapter when you're in college. You don't have to learn everybody's name in your class. You should know all of your brothers. Yeah. And your brothers are your lifelong friends. And by brothers, I mean brothers, and also, you know, the females as well. Everybody. Where's your brother? Right? 100%. Because I keep in touch with several of them, and some of them had very big jobs. One worked in the White House. Oh, nice. Worked at, he was a very senior guy at the FDIC.
Okay.
And others, there's others as well, and we stay in touch.
Yeah.
And those things again are very important later, because you never know who's going to introduce somebody to who.
Right.
So it turns out that one of my brothers knew the Secretary of Transportation very well. Introduced her to me at the time.
Yeah.
So things, I didn't really need anything at the time, but it's the relationship is there. And very often I will do that with others, because when you get to my state, like in my situation, you're networked. You're always networking again.
Absolutely.
But there's always, oh, I know such and such there, or I know this person are there, and you know who to contact and when to. Another example is know when to throw yourself across the railroad tracks. This is an example of working at a Chinese company.
Yeah.
There are times, or know when to pick your battles.
Yeah.
Same thing. There are times when you believe something is wrong. It's wrong because, not that it's illegal, that's one where you do throw yourself over the railroad tracks.
Right.
But it's something that is not a good idea. Because we tried this 20 years ago, and it's not going to work because we've tried it doesn't work. That's a case where you may be facing a brick wall and nobody's gonna listen to you. At that point, you don't throw yourself across the railroad tracks. You say, look, you'll see, we tried it, it doesn't work. If you want to try it again, maybe the environment is different now and it'll work.
Yeah.
It'll work now. But there are situations where you don't want to cross somebody because it's their idea.
Right.
And this happens in Chinese companies where a leader, we call them the leaders, has an idea that it's not going to work. And you're not going to win. Because in Chinese companies, people don't countermand what the leader said. The leader directed, the leader ordered, the leader commanded, so you got to do it.
That's what's going to happen.
But now Westerners, like myself, will sometimes challenge those things. And there are times when you're successful in saying, here's why it's not going to work.
Yeah.
The U.S. marketplace is different than the Chinese marketplace, where people, for example, in the U.S. will plan a trip to China a year ahead, 2 years ahead, a long trip. In China, people plan trips on 1 or 2 days' notice sometimes. So people change, and also things change all the time.
Right.
Trips change, everything changes. The rule is that if you have an appointment with somebody, let's have an appointment with you today, and somebody else is coming today and they're more important, sorry, Justin, but your meeting's canceled. This is very, very common in China, as an example. So you never can, and somebody started that people travel all the way to China for a meeting and the meeting gets canceled after they arrive. So that kind of thing can happen too.
That stuff's just crazy. But
that's the frustrating part.
Yeah.
But the rewarding part is you're working with a culture that's different. When I was in school, again, China was verboten. Nobody was in China.
Right.
And there was no communication, hardly at all. It was just behind the Iron Curtain, whatever you call it, the bamboo curtain.
Yeah.
Now, again, I go to China, it's no big deal.
Yeah.
It's becoming, there's a Starbucks on every corner.
Yep.
If you ever are desperate for your American culture, you go into the Starbucks.
Yeah.
But it's, that's the part that I kind of enjoy, that that there's still a lot of foreign culture there.
Right.
That you're not used to. I was at a place a few weeks ago called Yan'an in China, and I got into a taxi with my colleague, and I think I was the first foreigner the guy had ever spoken to.
Really?
A small city of 2.3 million people.
Yeah.
Most Chinese have never been to that city either.
Yeah. I like that 2.3 million in China as a
small city.
Yeah.
Small city, 2.3 million people.
I wanted to ask, outside of work and your travel, because obviously you're all in and doing a lot with Hainan here and bouncing around all over. You got, I think on the phone we discussed you're jumping to a bunch of different.
Or chip, whatever.
Yeah, I got a chip. You bet. It'll flash at me if I don't. So what I wanted to ask though was, outside of all that bouncing around, if somebody was going to run into you on the street or in public, hobbies or anything else, is there a place that people are more likely to find you in your off time?
Probably at airport. No, I mean, with my schedule, it's very tough these days. I mean, I've got friends all over the world. When I get time off, I try and visit some of them. So my girlfriend's in Austin, so we'll be meeting in Barcelona in a few weeks, and we're going to head up to a reunion of a whole bunch of friends in Krakow, Poland.
Oh, awesome.
And then go back to Barcelona, and then we've got a few days left, and we may go to one of the islands in like New York or something like that, because I've got time. It's during the Chinese holiday when everybody's on vacation for a week, one of the golden weeks.
Yeah.
So the emails suddenly stop, the WeChat suddenly stops, and it's the perfect time to take a few days off.
That's awesome.
So I'll do that. But no, I've got a pretty much scheduled. I spend Christmas every year in Brazil for the last 20-something years. So I've got son in Brazil, and I've become very attached to the family there. I get to Colombia at least for a week every year also, because my girlfriend's family is there. And I spend some time in Argentina, you know, whenever I can get down there.
No, that's awesome.
And this year I have my 50th high school reunion.
That'll be great.
Which I figure you only have once in a lifetime chance to do that. And so I'll sneak in for that on a weekend.
That's so great. No, but I love it because you love what you do, and then you love to travel, and everything just is dialed in.
Yeah,
It's so awesome. Is there anybody out there, whether it's a personal mentor or just somebody in business or somebody that you're reading or somebody that you're looking up to, that you're following what they're doing, or you're choosing to absorb their message, or their like business books or other podcasts or anything like that?
Well, I do a lot of reading. I don't read fiction. I read nonfiction.
Okay.
A lot of historical stuff, because I always wondered about. When I once asked one of my teachers, I said, "Why do we have to study history? It's old stuff. Who needs it?" But I find reading history books, particularly modern history, gives you a big perspective on the world, because you see things repeating. And you see that, you know, history does repeat itself. And I find that history, from one of the least important subject to be actually the most important.
Yeah.
And that can apply to politics, but it also applies to business. So I do read some books about, for example, I read about one of my mentors in the old days was Bob Crandall, who was the president of American Airlines for a number of years. I worked for Bob. He's still around. He's on TV sometimes. And he was a tough boss, but he was a fair boss. And some of my former bosses, one of my first boss at American Airlines in Dallas, there's a few of them, consider some of them mentors, and I still keep in touch with them. My former boss, Rick Nelson, is the one who told me I need to get an M.B.A.
Okay.
If I didn't listen to him, I probably wouldn't have done it. So things like that. And so I look up to those people. Now, you know, we consider ourselves more equals.
Sure.
But I think you need to you need to keep learning.
Yeah.
And mine is, now, the thing about it is I like reading history books, but I also like to go to the place.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So I read a big book about Nagasaki. I've not been there, but I'd like to go to Nagasaki.
Yeah.
And I read a lot of books about European history. And, you know, I've been all over most of those places anyway. And I might read a different book on the same event with a different perspective sometimes. So I wish I had more time for podcasts. I really don't.
Yeah.
I follow the news and things like that. And I follow the international news a lot, because you have to be aware of working at a Chinese company. You've got to know what's going on in China as well as what's going on in the U.S. and in the industry.
I just found the Wall Street Journal does, if you know the What's News section in the Journal, they have a podcast where they'll read that to you.
Oh, really?
So you don't have to get the paper. Yeah, I just found it.
I didn't have time during the week to read the paper, but I like to read it on the weekends.
Yeah.
They've got a weekend edition, the WSJ, I like that.
The weekend edition's good.
And I look at a lot of stuff, you know, online to keep abreast of what's going on. Years ago, everything was paper. We used to get the Aviation Daily every day. They'd route it around the office, and I'd get it like 3 weeks after it was published to learn what's going on with the airlines. Now everything just comes instantly into my inbox.
Right.
I just read the headlines.
Yeah.
If I need to read something more detail, I can go into it.
Yeah.
But it's hard to believe that we existed before the internet and cell phones and things like that.
Isn't it amazing how much information we have access to?
I had nothing on my desk but papers.
Yeah.
You know, maybe I had a calculator, but we didn't have any way to get any kind of news instantly.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I really appreciate you making time for me today, and everybody. Hope we bring a lot of value. Hope we bring a lot of value to them, and I wanted to ask two last things. First, is there anything that we started to touch on and didn't, or was there anything that you wanted to be sure to bring up or talk about that we didn't cover?
No, I think you pretty much covered everything there. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously I could talk for hours on some of these topics.
Sure.
I've met a lot of famous people, in the course of my business. When I was back at American Airlines, we did a lot of work with the Hollywood studios and
Oh, yeah.
movie studios. And here I deal more with, we've dealt with some Chinese actors and things of that nature. And also, famous people, politicians and, business leaders too.
Yeah.
So those are, in learning the basic background and doing business helps you in dealing with those people as well, because they're all different. Everybody's got different personalities.
Right.
We had a meeting with the president of Microsoft last week, as an example. So
Oh wow.
you end up not having to, but you have opportunities to meet people in different walks of life that can be famous.
Right.
And that's something that, again, you learn. You have to learn that there's no course in how do you deal with different personalities.
Yeah.
Because the Hollywood people are generally have very high egos and things like that, but business people too.
Sure.
And you have to learn how to respect those and how to deal with them and what they're expecting.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So, other than that, you have to just kind of go with the flow.
Yeah.
And I've got another
Yeah, I love
rule
it.
is work hard and play hard.
I love it. Yeah. That's awesome. If somebody watches this and they want to say hello or reach out to you, is there an easy way for them to find you? Is there a best practice to? Do you prefer LinkedIn?
LinkedIn is good if you don't just request a connection, write something in there.
Right.
Like I'm AK Psi, and I'd like to learn more, blah 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 blah, that kind of stuff. Because LinkedIn, I can tell you, a lot of people have gotten jobs through LinkedIn.
Yeah, it's I've seen LinkedIn change shape 2 or 3 times since its induction, and it's really ramping up to be a kind of a powerhouse network.
Yeah, it's not even a social network. It's more of a business network, and it's a way to manage. There's so many social networks. I don't want somebody sending me stuff on Facebook.
Right.
That's totally inappropriate.
It's a different ball game.
LinkedIn is business.
100%.
But I have like thousands of people on LinkedIn. I don't accept a lot of the ones I get because some of them are, who knows, they're anywhere in the world.
Right.
So I'd like to be your friend, and it's somebody in a completely different business and things of that nature.
Yeah.
I usually accept 1 out of maybe 10 or 1 out of 20.
Yeah.
But by writing in some more specifics, that moves
It's
you
nice
way
to know
to
that
the
you have a
list.
connection. 'Cause I see the same thing too, and I'm like, how did we? I don't know.
I don't even know.
Yeah, and so I'm like, okay, well, have we met? I don't know. So, well, this has been great. I really appreciate it, making time for us. Hopefully, like I said, people will get some great value, and we'll look forward to maybe have a chance to do one again somewhere in the future.
Sure.
Awesome.
Pleasure. Thanks, Justin.
Thanks so much, Joel.